Hello, hello, hello. It is July 8th, 2020. It's Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. And I hope everybody is doing well out there. I hope you had a nice, beautiful, hopefully not too stressful July 4th weekend. If, of course, you're an American. I know we do have some non-Americans who watch this show once in a while. They tune in I've been told late at night over there in Europe and England. So welcome to all of them if they're tuning in tonight. But for all us Americans, there were a lot of fireworks this weekend. I'm sure some people, unfortunately, hurt themselves using those fireworks, at least a few of them, unfortunately. And I'm sure there were a lot of scared pets out there as well. Me personally, I have never lit a firework. I have never bought a firework. Just really, I guess, never got into it. And frankly, on top of everything else, I don't trust myself. I would be one of those guys that I am one of those people who, I'd be afraid of blowing my fingers off. So I stay away from this stuff. LaFord and Laura and Indy and Concha and Susan and Jasmine and Christine and Cherie, Angela, Carol, Karen, Mandy, made it from Florida. Where at, Mandy? Where are you from in Florida? I'm coming to everybody from Clearwater Beach. A lot of you people know that. Where are you, Mandy? Hello, Carrie, Kathy, Michelle. So on Saturday night, I can't say that I'm big into fireworks anyway. So I actually, while the booming and from not this way looking west, of course, west is the water, so no fireworks over there, but looking to the east, all sorts of fireworks going on off around the area. And I was writing the Patreon blog on Saturday night. That's my that's my social life on a Saturday night, writing the Patreon blog that you can read if you are a Patreon member at patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. That's what I was doing on Saturday night. I'm hoping that I enjoy writing. I mean, it is fun to me, but you're not your stereotypical kind of fun. So I hope you are all having fun in your own way. Amanda, Suzanne, Mandy says I know exactly where DeBerry is. Mandy, there is a spectacular, from what I've heard, I've not played it yet. There's at least one spectacular disc golf course in DeBerry, Florida. However, like I said, I've never played it yet. But DeBerry, the disc golf course there, I would say, is fairly new, within the last 5 years, something like that. And I know the guy that runs that tournament every year. It's usually held like in December. So I do know DeBerry, even though I've never been there. Hello, Miranda and Anne and Indy. Indy says when she was little, or he was little, Indy Ava, I was afraid of sparklers. My dad had to put clothes kind of on the handles. So, Michelle's, okay, Indy, I had sparklers. I don't really consider those to be fireworks. I did have sparklers as a little kid, but I just never messed around with anything that explodes. Michelle, you are as thrilling as me. I'm not a very thrilling guy. I'll be first to admit it. I'm kind of a boring guy. Put clothes on so you could hold them, Indy. Gotcha. Hello, Carrie. Got off from work, came home, hid from society. Sounds good to me. Mandy, yep. Yes, there is a disc golf course there. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Christine. Has to be one of this live show's most generous viewers every Wednesday night. Thank you, Christine. And what Christine is doing there, she is using the super chat button, which is that circle with the $sign with the circle around it, to contribute to the program. It's much like PayPal or being a Patreon member. So Christine, thank you. Anybody else wants to do that, we would deeply appreciate it at Unfound. It's also a good way if you want to see a comments to be seen or ask a question to make sure I don't miss it. It's a good way using the super chat option that we have now that the YouTube channel is monetized. Amanda, thank you, Christine. Amanda from Facebook, never did change my name when I got married. Hello, Amanda. Hello, Valerie. Christine says, because I missed last week's live. You're allowed to miss them, Christine. Of course, if you miss them, they are always automatically right away available on the YouTube channel. What else did I do this weekend? Actually, speaking of disc golf, I actually have a couple things to bring up regarding that. I played in a one-round tournament on Sunday up in Hudson, Florida, and played okay. I could have shot maybe 4 throws better. Made some stupid mistakes, kind of lost my mind for about 4 baskets right there in the middle. But started out really good, ended really well. The middle, not so good, but at least I didn't have the yips. It felt very comfortable out there. And actually, I was out throwing this evening before this show started. Had to come home and take a shower and everything. You are forgiven for the typos, Indy. Don't ever worry about that. Thank you, Christine. Mandy says, my husband said a coworker was talking about the new disc golf course and it's supposed to be nice. It is. I've seen pictures, Mandy. But I've not played it yet. Several of my friends have, and they've been very complimentary. And I know that they run a really good tournament over there. Miranda says, watching the rerun isn't as fun without everyone here live. Well, that's nice of you to say, Miranda. Saying that about everybody. That's very kind of you to say. There's something else, being the probably other than missing persons cases, at least on the live show, disc golf is second because I'm always doing something regarding that. I have been asked by a good friend of mine who is in the disc golf community here in the Tampa area and particularly Pinellas County. He is going to be starting a disc golf show. I don't know if it's going to be just audio or it's going to be, if it's going to be live, it's going to be recorded. Is it going to be on Zoom and YouTube? I don't know yet. He's putting it together, not me. I don't do that. I just play disc golf. But he has asked me to be part of the show. I don't know how often it's going to be. I think he said maybe once a month. Once again, it's all up to him. But he has asked me to be on the show. I don't know if a co-host or just make an appearance once in a while. But just out of the blue, this happened a couple weeks ago. I actually ran it by my assistants. I asked them if they thought it, given everything that Unfound does, would it be appropriate for me to appear on a show like that once a month or whatever it's going to be. And my assistants gave it the thumbs up. So I'm going to do it. And when it comes out, I don't know what's going to be called. Like I said, he just asked me if I would be interested in that. And I eventually told him yes. So I don't know when it's going to happen. Maybe not until this fall. But I really am looking forward to it. Talking about the sport, talking about issues in the sport, talking about he has a lot of experience. I've been playing the sport for about 8 years. Although I play like I've only been playing it for 1. But we have a lot of insights about the sport, and that's what he's going to be doing. And he asked me to be a part of it. So I'm looking forward to it. I don't know when it's going to be, but when it happens, you will all, I will let all of you know, and I hope that you will take an interest in it. I know it's not true crime, but if I can help spread the word about disc golf to people who haven't heard about it, I'm going to do that. And so I'm looking forward to it. I know we're going to probably get into some touchy topics and things regarding the sport, because I think that like anything, it can be improved. One thing I will not be doing on the program is giving any advice on skills or technique or anything, because mine still have a long way to go. I'll be looking at it from more like a business point of view than actually teaching people the game. That I should probably not be doing that. Angela says adding sportscaster to your resume. Yeah, maybe. I don't know how I would put it. It's just going to be a disc golf commentary chat show, fairly laid back, I'm guessing. But like I said, I'm not running it. I'm not in control of it or anything else, and that's fine by me. But um, I I couldn't. I can't pass up the opportunity, given that it's a sport, and if I think I can help the sport, then I'm going to do that. So maybe within the next few months. As you're watching, do not forget, please give this show that you're watching, the Unfound Live Show, a thumbs up. Please like this video. That's very important so that it can get seen. It raises the algorithm, however those YouTube algorithms work, and it can become searchable for people who are looking for anything regarding true crime. And so please remember to do that. Please remember to like this show that you're watching tonight before it ends. I would deeply appreciate it. And once again, I know that I posted this video last week, at the beginning of last week, that if you ever have problems not watching the show, but chatting, please find the video that I made the beginning of last week about if you are having problems, you're watching, but you can't find the chat button or something. I did a video on that last Monday that hopefully can help some of you out if you ever have that issue. Let's get started in this. What I forgot to talk about last week, and I feel very bad about this, is that another of Unfound's guests died within the last couple weeks. Like I said, I should have talked about this last week. Janice Norwood, the mother of Kimberly Norwood, that was a disappearance we must have covered in 2018 sometime, I'm thinking, or late 2017, somewhere in there. She unfortunately passed away on June 27th, which once again was a couple weeks ago. And maybe you don't know this. Her husband, Kim's father, passed away within the last year as well. I had not talked to Janice for quite a while. However, somebody did let me know that she was having some health problems and let me know that she had gone into the hospital, and then also let me know that she probably wasn't going to make it. It's these types of times, these times when I always have regrets. As you know, we've had a couple other guests pass away. First was Jessica Curtis, who frankly committed suicide in October of 2018. And then October of 2019, Donna Jean Cap passed away also from some type of illness. And I felt very bad about that because I had not talked to her in a while before that happened. Whereas with Jessica Curtis, I think that she passed away on a Tuesday, and I had just talked to her 2 days before that on a Sunday through Messenger. And so I was very stunned to learn that. So this was Janice Norwood. She passed away a couple weeks ago. And I know I always feel bad because we just weren't able to get those answers for these people before they passed away. Now, of course, many people who have, I'm not here to get into faith and religion or anything else. Of course, many people will believe that they now, have the answers that they wanted their whole lives. I hope that's true. But here I just try to worry about the material world, this mortal coil or whatever they call it. And here in the material world, I just feel bad that we were not able to get answers that these people wanted, that these people needed before they passed away. So, like I said, I forgot to mention that a week ago. I'd known about it, and I forgot to put it on my agenda. I have this if you ever see me looking over that way, that's where the agenda is on my other computer. I'm looking at it, and I forgot to put it on there, so I did not mention it. So I hope Janice rests in peace. I'm guessing that, on top of losing her daughter so many years ago, that losing her husband obviously was probably very hard on her too. So I like Janice a lot. I thought that she did a great interview when I got to talk to her. We got along very well. I think that she was very appreciative of getting the word out there about her daughter's disappearance. It's a disappearance. Of course, I see Kim's picture every day when I go through I have a file on my computer that has all the pictures of every disappearance, every missing person that we've covered. And I go into that file every day for one reason or another. And so I see all of these missing people every day, their pictures. And so I see Kim's picture every day. And if that is not a disappearance that you've listened to yet, probably now would be a good time to do so. And so you get to hear my conversation with Janice. I think that in her daughter's disappearance, I think that this guy that was working her for the family at the time is a very good suspect. But I will admit that thinking back to that episode, there were people who were suspicious, frankly, of Kimberly's father, Janice's husband, regarding the disappearance. And there could be the chance that maybe Kim went off into the woods and just got lost. Of course, that is a possibility too. Once again, if you know about the disappearance, then these things are very familiar to you. If you're not, then once again, I urge you to listen to that episode. Like I said, I think that was 2017, sometime in 2017 or 2018. Surely wasn't 2019. So it was 2017 or sometime in 2018. Disappearance in Texas. Of course, we've covered many disappearances from there. So that is, to my knowledge, she is the third guest to pass away. Once again, Jessica Curtis, who is Tyler Stice's sister, and Donna Jean Kapp, who is Dorian Myers' sister. So there you go. Let's move on to Unfound on the Ground. This would be something for those premium Patreon members. That would be people at the $12 a month level and above. The next episode of Unfound on the Ground is coming out this Monday. And that would be July 13th, 2020. And it will start at 8:15 p.m. Eastern time, I think, just like the last one did. And the topic will be how to find sources for disappearances. How do you go about doing that? If you get interested in a disappearance, one that catches your eye, maybe it's one that's very, very old or very new or somewhere in between, whether it's in your area or the whole way across the United States or whatever. How do you go about finding people who would know something about that disappearance? How to go about finding family members, which is, of course, something we do all the time at Unfound. How do you find others, maybe people who took part in searches or people like that? Maybe how do you track down witnesses of, let's say, that the person was last seen in a convenience store or something? How do you go about finding those people? That will be the discussion on Monday night. And once again, Dr. Eric Grabowski will be running the show. Michelle says, I agree. Ed, I suspected him always, the guy who worked for them, not her father, Michelle says, regarding Kimberly Norwood's disappearance. Carrie says, Janice was a spectacular guest. She will be missed. She will be. And Like I said, I hadn't talked to her in a while, and that is my fault. Thank you for posting that, Cherie. Once again, patreon.com/unfound podcast. If you would like to read the blogs, if you would like to get some free books, or if you really want to step up and you can be part of the Unfound Think Tank on Sunday evenings, and then the once a month Unfound on the Grounds. Once again, the next one will be this Monday at 8:15 p.m. through Zoom. Michelle said, Janice had a notebook full of everything about Kimberly, and she was so organized and determined. Yeah, I know. You just, going back to that for a moment, I am reminded of something that it's just something that's stuck with me since very early on in Unfound's existence, going back to 2016 when I had Regina Marie Boss's sister on, who she did the interview for that. And I remember in that interview her saying, of course, off the top of my head, Regina Marie Boss disappeared in 2000. Off the top of my head, it's been a while. But her sister could remember, she remembers like way back then, she would go to these missing persons get-togethers, and she would run into families who had been, had a missing loved one. Let's say it was like 2002 and Regina had been missing for a couple years. She would run into people who had missing loved one for 20 years. And she was thinking, oh, it's never going to get to that. My sister's disappearance will surely be solved, before then. I can't imagine what these people are going through. And then here we are, of course, about 20 years later, and Regina Marie Boss is still missing, and there's no real, information out there. It's certainly one of the tougher ones that Unfound is covered. And, you bringing that up, Michelle, you think back to Kimberly, who disappeared, I believe, in 1989, that I'm sure at the time that her family never could have imagined that they would live out the rest of their lives, 30 years, and Kimberly still be missing. It just doesn't seem possible. But it happened. Just hard to believe. Just, and like you said, organized, determined, doing this for as long as they had, trying to get the word out about Kimberly's disappearance, and still it's bad. It really once again challenges your faith, challenges your ideas about the goodness in the world, and challenges your idea of fairness in this world. It just doesn't seem fair. And I don't know how you square it. I just don't. So it's very sad. You're right, Michelle. The Thompson poll, Charles Thompson, that's the disappearance that we covered this past Friday. A large majority of you do believe that he was murdered. I can't say that I disagree with you. And in fact, in the think tank that was conducted on Sunday evening, a majority of the group decided upon that as well. Although we're not totally sure who did it. Maybe it was Christopher Ross. Maybe it was Jay Ball. Maybe it was a combination of people. But what was interesting about it, but there was a minority group, a smaller group in the think tank who thought that he did have an overdose, and other people covered it up. It's certainly possible as well. What was interesting, though, is that the poll in the discussion group, when it started out, that the overdose choice got out to a very early lead, and then the choice about him being murdered then passed it up after maybe the first 24 hours or 36 hours, 48 hours. I hadn't seen that happen before, where one particular choice gets out to a lead and then one overtakes it. Usually the one that starts out in the lead, let's say in the first 12 hours, is the one that ends up being the most popular. And that was not the situation with Charles Thompson's poll. I don't know why. I don't know why the dynamics of the poll were that way this time. But that was the decision. A large majority of you came to the conclusion that he was murdered by somebody. And this is one where the think tank and the discussion group and myself, once again, the majority, agreed. But there was a very vocal minority as well. Let's take a question. I have quite a few questions tonight, so I better get to these. Jill, who always seems to get one question in a week, and always a really good one. Were we ever working on a case that got solved before we could bring it to air? Jill, the answer is yes. I don't know how it's happened at least once. I can think of one time. Maybe there have been more. You have to remember, we're getting up near that 4th year anniversary. But there was at least one. I might have even talked about it when it happened, but I'm not going to name the name or anything now. But Emily had reached out or been contacted by the daughter of her mother had been missing. That's the way I think it was. And during the course of us starting, I talked to this daughter at least twice. And then at some point, she discovered that there were remains somewhere, and the DNA was going to be, her DNA was in the NamUs database. It was going to be tested. And then it turned out that this was her mother. And it seems, the way I remember it, is that her mother was murdered. And I think it's something now that they're continuing to work on. I did not put the name down here. Thank you, Kindle. But so, Jill, the answer is yes. I can think of one that we were working on, but then in this particular situation, there were remains that had been found the way I remember it years ago, and they finally got to test this daughter's DNA against these remains, and it was her mother. There may be one or two others, possibly. They just don't come to mind right at this second. I guess, kind of like Eric Proct. I think that's how or Eric Pratt. This young man whose remains were discovered just a few months ago in Colorado. And it was the ultimate determination that he had committed suicide. I guess you could kind of say that we were working on that because I had talked to his parents and they were going to be on the program. And then they decided to not do an interview, but they were always welcome on the program. And I could foresee a situation where if Eric hadn't been, his remains hadn't been found a couple years ago or a couple months ago, that they might have been on the program before the end of this year. So you maybe could say that one as well. And there might be one or two more kind of like that, but not many. Not many, really, because from the time we talk to somebody until they get on the air is not that long, maybe a couple months. So for somebody to be missing 10 years and then that for them to be discovered or remains or identified within a very short window of 2 months, like 10 years later or however long later, would be pretty rare. Not very probable, not a high probability of happening. So, but it has happened. Once again, I want to remind all of you that if you're watching, please like this video. And maybe if you aren't, maybe become a subscriber. I know we went over 9,000 subscribers for the YouTube channel recently, which is crazy to me. It's just crazy because the YouTube channel, even though we have a ton of videos on here and Natasha is doing a great job with it, the YouTube channel is not that old. It's really not. So, to have 9,000 9,000 some subscribers, I think is pretty good. So if you aren't a subscriber, please subscribe. And if you're watching this video, please like it. Please find that little button on your phone, your tablet, your laptop to like the video. Give it a thumbs up. Michelle says, Jolene and I have been talking about carrying on for Janice. It's very nice of you, Michelle. Yeah, it's so important in these disappearances when somebody who is the prominent person dies, that somebody needs to take over. Like Tyler Stice's case, Donna Jean's disappearance, and then now Kimberly's. Somebody needs to do that. I know it's difficult, but somebody needs to do that. So Jill, there you are, Jill. I just answered your question. I hope you got to hear the answer. Andy says, I lean more towards murder. I guess you're talking about Charles Thompson. Once again, thank you for the compliment, Kindle. Valerie says that she believes Charles OD'd. That's fine. So Shauna, thank you for that. Sherry says, I'm new here. I live in the same town in Kentucky where Tyler North disappeared. Yeah, that's one, I think, Sherry, that's pretty clear cut. But, we know that sometimes these things take time. For sure. But that's interesting to me. Thank you for watching tonight, Sherry, being a new viewer. And Kindle, thank you for viewing for the first time as well. You know what? While we're at it, I'm going to take another question, and then we'll get into some other things. Because like I said, I got at least 6 questions to answer tonight. I want to cover all of them. And I don't want to have to do them very quickly. Natasha asked me, and that is my assistant, Natasha. She had asked me privately in the through Messenger today, and she asked me this, and I said, well, how about I just answer this during the show? Natasha says, murders are up. What is the reason for that? And I'm not going to get into all the politics and everything. I'm not going to do that. Okay. And Natasha sent me an article from the New York Times to read, and I read it. And what I took from it is there's actually 2 things going on. It seems that murders in big cities this year are up, but other types of crime or violent crime are down. And Natasha has her own idea, and I'm not going to voice her idea, but first of all, you have to understand something. And most people don't even realize this, and I've talked about it before, but I will do it again. That despite what has been going on recently, of course, a lot of violence and stores being riots and all these things that have been going on. I was born in 1970. Yes, I'm going to be 50 on August 1st. But when I was born on August 1st, 1970, the United States was a much more violent country than it is now. By any statistic that you want to use. And most people don't realize that. But that's what the FBI stats say. I don't do these studies, of course. I just know what people who have looked into these statistics have said and written about and have done videos, and you can find all this information for yourself. When I was born on August 1st, 1970, by the way, the number 1 song at the time was Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel. Garfunkel, not Simon and Garfunkel. There were way more rapes and murders and robberies and burglaries and everything else, at least once again in the United States. I'm just going to speak for my own country, than there are now. And since then, it has been a slow, steady decline in crime and violent crime in the United States. The 80s were less violent than the 70s. The 90s were less violent than the 80s. The 2000s were less violent than the 90s. And the 2010s have been less violent than the 2000s. And so when you look at this, and if, crime, murders are up this year, well, that's true. But if you read the article, what it says, though, is that the level of crime this year is no different than when it was in 2015, just 5 years ago. So I'm not sure what to make of it. It could be a statistical blip. It could be something. I know that, when you have so many people who have lost their jobs and are out of work, and what's the saying? Idle hands are the devil's playground. And I think when you have people who are sitting at home and don't have anywhere to go, and things are going to happen. The fact is that humans are social animals. There is a reason there is a term cabin fever. And we know that depression and all sorts of different ailments, mental ailments, can be connected to people who are in isolation too long. So I think it all adds up, on top of the fact it may just be a statistical blip. Lots of things put together. I happen to believe that this downward trend will continue despite everything that's going on. And that's really all I really want to say about that on here. I do not believe that we are becoming a more violent country. If somebody's going to say, well, 2020 really... I believe that the nature of humans has not changed in thousands and thousands, whatever you believe in creationism or evolution or whatever else, that the nature of humans is still the same as it was whenever Homo sapiens became Homo sapiens. That's my particular worldview. We've gotten more technologically advanced. We've gotten more medically advanced. We can live to 80s, 90s, into the hundreds and everything, but our nature is still the same. And we do have a nature that can be very, very violent. And that's but we have the capacity to make agreements with people, make laws, make contracts, and things like that, so we don't all end up killing each other. But our nature is violent. But it's just good that at least over the last 50 years in the United States, that the rates have gone down. There's a lot of different reasons. Better crime-solving techniques. People, I think, are more aware of how crimes happen. Just something simple as video cameras and street lights and lights in parking lots and all those things can certainly add to the crime coming down. Every little bit counts. Every little bit. Thank you, Valerie. Everybody's complimenting each other. That's nice. What about mass massacres, restaurants and schools and the movies? Shauna, I once again, I would just urge anybody who has any interest in the topic of crime in the United States, violent crime in the United States, just go to the FBI website and look up the stats of what they say over the last several decades. Don't take my word for it. Just go see what they say. But I've been there and that's what they say. But I'm of a believer facts were not meant to be believed. They're meant to be researched. So you can check that out for yourself. That murder and all the violent crimes are down. Now, what's up? Mental illness and drug addiction, suicides. Those have gone up since I was born. Violent crime has gone down. Those are the stats. So let's move on to come back to the questions in a little bit. And I always wonder why this thing doesn't want to work with my left hand. Okay. Let's move on to this. Once again, speaking of Natasha, she brought something up to me several days ago. She sent me an email about how many drug disappearances that could involve drugs we've covered recently. And I'll just leave it at that. We got into another discussion about another program that I'm not going to get into. I would never do that publicly. But, and I got to thinking about it. And once again, I want to remind you that relationships, according to the stats I keep for Unfound, relationships are the number one cause of disappearances. Drugs are certainly up there. Of course, it can be combined. A relationship that involves drugs and money, drugs and crime, drugs or relationships and money, all sorts of different combinations. But it seems we do talk quite a bit about missing people who have had or have an addiction. And why is that? And why does it seem that, at least perceptually, that Unfound covers more of those types of disappearances than maybe other programs do? Now, Disappeared has covered a few, but not a lot. Certainly not as many, I think, as Unfound has covered, at least as a percentage. So why might that be true? And I've come up with 3 different reasons. Took some time to think about this. First of all, you have to understand that we talk to everybody. So being that we don't turn anybody away, it stands to reason then that we would cover more disappearances that would involve addictions or drugs or a combination of things. And when I say drugs, I mean both addicts, and we've covered the disappearance of some drug dealers too. Donnie Smatlack, Jeff Joseph, Cameron Rember. We don't care. We cover those disappearances as hard as all of the people who weren't into those things. And we do, and I do realize that drugs do ruin people's lives. And what I would say is that Donnie Smatlack was breaking the law. He should have gone to jail and prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law. I would say the same about Jeff Joseph. I would even say the same about Cameron Remmer, even though I spent about a year, along with help from my assistants, trying to get deeper into that disappearance. But I still feel the same way. But I do it for the family. They want to find out what happened. We're here to help. So I think one of the reasons is we don't turn anybody away. Number 2, many programs are based on having marketable victims. What does the victim look like? Is she attractive? Is he attractive? Was he president of his class? Was she the head cheerleader? Were they, did they go to an Ivy League school? What kind of life were they living? Were they, things like that. Those types of disappearances are, from a marketing standpoint, easier to sell to the public than people who aren't like that. And we know that not every missing person, as far as making life choices and what they've done with their lives, not every person can be Tom Brown or Suzanne Lyle. Okay, that's just not the way things work. And being that Unfound is a little different than that, I just don't look at people as being marketing objects. But as all of you know, Unfound is not controlled by any advertisers. We don't have any advertisers. Whereas TV shows do, a lot of podcasts do. And so those companies who advertise on those programs could say, no, we want more high profile, better people, because people take more of an interest in those disappearances than these people who aren't like that. I haven't seen that in Unfound statistics, but some people believe that. Don't know. So I think the number 2 is that many programs dismiss a lot of missing persons cases because there are people who just don't fit in a certain demographic. And then number 3, the reason I think that Unfound covers so many of these types of disappearances is because because of the kind of the first two that I've already mentioned, especially number two, there are just a lot of family members who can't get any attention. They want media coverage. They want somebody to take an interest. They want to be on a TV program to talk about their missing loved one, but nobody will have them. So they make great guests. They're very easy to talk to. And so they're very eager to be on the program. And so when people are eager to be on the program, it's easier to get them on the program, especially when they've been blown off by so many other programs. Once again, TV shows, podcasts, whatever you want, YouTube shows, whatever. They've just been blown off by a lot of people. And then somebody, not just, and I know that Unfound is not alone. There's obviously a lot of other programs who do cover missing persons who have addictions and women who are prostitutes and criminals, outright criminals. But I'm just talking from Unfound's point of view that a lot of these family members, because they have been blown off so many times, when they finally come across a host that says, yeah, let's talk, they're ready to talk. They're ready to say everything that needs to be known. And we're in the information business. And so if they're eager to talk, I'm eager to talk, and they're very easy to get on the program because they've been dying to for several years. So I think those are the three reasons that we cover so many of these types of disappearances. Of course, we cover a lot that aren't like that as well. Like I said, Kimberly Raymer, Tom Brown, Suzanne Lyle, Joshua Guimond. You could go make a long list of people who did not, weren't criminals, did not have any drug addictions or anything, didn't have any shady behavior or anything, but we've covered a lot of people like that as well. Once again, I don't care. But I think that's also why when you look at the entirety of all the disappearances that Unfound has covered, we've covered, most demographics out there. I think we have. I think we have a why. I think we've been very diverse in the people who we've covered for disappearances. I think we've done that. I think we have. So if you're ever wondering about that, if that ever occurs to you, if you're going back through Unfound's all the disappearances that we've covered and you listen to a few and it's like, well, drugs are involved in this one, drugs are involved. What is this? Well, it's because we're just open to those people. We're just open. Hello, Ms. Cat. Carrie says addiction is a very risky lifestyle and increases your chances exponentially. I think we've certainly shown that on the program, Carrie. Kathy says addiction affects everyone in the family. It is horrible. Yep, Kathy. Yes. Amanda, and their lives are just as important. I think it's the reason the police hear about some of these missing people and they throw their file to the bottom of the pile. That Amanda, I believe that does happen. I don't like to think about that, but I think it does happen too often. I'm not saying in every jurisdiction across the United States, but it certainly does happen. It certainly does. Ms. Cat with a super chat post. Thank you. You're very generous, Ms. Cat. Ed, I appreciate your interviews with the family members. You give them a platform. However, what do you say to those who claim it re-victimizes the family to contact them again? It's their choice to be on the program. I mean, hey, as I've talked about, and Emily could probably do an hour show on her own talking about how many times she's been blown off. And I've told you about some people who we'll talk to and then they'll no call, no show. We'll make an appointment to talk and it just doesn't happen. So we do get blown off sometimes, Ms. Cat. I think we've gotten a little better. Yes. Emily, there's Emily. Emily's watching tonight. Yeah, she's saying, you can see it right there. Yes, don't get me started. Yeah. Emily herself could write a whole book about getting blown off and no call, no show, just on her own. That wouldn't even include any of the stories that I have. So it's their choice to be on the program. And if somebody says, no, we don't want to talk, we don't contact them again. I realized that the way we do interviews and the way I conduct them, as technical and as thorough as I like to be, is not easy. But to my knowledge, there's never been a guest who's ever been on the program who regrets it. So that's the way I think about it, Ms. Cat. It's their choice. It's not like I can't force them to be on the program. If they don't want to talk, then we don't talk. We just don't. So I don't know how that re-victimizes them. They don't want to talk to us. They don't have to talk. But, and we have that happen. But what also happens sometimes is we do start conversations with people and then they figuratively disappear. They just stop returning phone calls and texts and whatever else. They say they're going to talk. We make an appointment and then we never hear from them again. So that happens too. Michelle says, I think of Brandy Wells every day and always willing to tell her story and don't understand why others wouldn't. Yeah. Amanda says, no one is forcing them. I think there's just a lot of keyboard warriors that claim that. The internet is for complaining. I'm just telling you how we do things. That's all I'm doing. I've only met a few of Unfound's guests in person. Most of them I only know over the internet, over the phone. And like I said, if any of them believe that being on the program was bad, that is news to me. Now, some of them got crap from their family. That certainly happened. I would never tell you, but I could tell you some stories about finding out about that after the fact that the guests have told me that, but they themselves don't regret it. They don't regret it. Okay. All right. So drug disappearances. Once again, we don't care. We don't care. Let's move on to something else. Linda Stoltzfoos from Pennsylvania, Bird in Hand, Pennsylvania, still missing. Of course, I did an Unfound, the first and only right now, Unfound Now episode on YouTube, which got quite a few views. She's still missing. Must be a month now, about a month since she went missing. She is still missing. So once again, as I think I said last week, and I'll say it again this week, the longer you get away from this type of disappearance, once again, a destination type of disappearance where somebody is traveling from point A to point B and the person disappears. At the beginning, there are all sorts of possibilities because no searches have been done, nobody's been talked to, and everything else. But as the hours turn into days, days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, the possibilities of what happened really, really narrow. And I think that we are at the point in Linda's disappearance that probably the main choices would be either she did get snatched up by somebody or she ran off with somebody. Either she made a choice to go with somebody, or she got forced to go somewhere with somebody. That's where I think we are. Of course, she was walking and they've searched the entire area. I mean, how far could she go? Nobody saw her walking. It's at this point, very limited choices as to what could have happened to her. That doesn't mean she's deceased. It just means that there are just a few possibilities, I think, at this point. She might have just, I just don't know how she would have run off by herself, being that she didn't have a car. And then this is not to be funny, but are there any horses missing or anything? I'm not trying to be funny, but this is that type of community. Absent that, she must have gotten, once again, snatched up, or she was talking with somebody somewhere, and that person, and she left. Maybe she didn't want to be in that community anymore. And we do know of people who are Amish or Mennonites who do leave that culture. That happens. And there are people who go to that culture, get back to a simpler way of life. That's fine too. I'm hoping, of course, I'm hoping that she's alive. I'm hoping that she just decided to get out of there and wanted to live a different lifestyle, and she's happy somewhere. Of course, that's what I hope. The odds of that being the case, I don't know. Yeah, Amanda, I'm just referring to the people who say it re-victimizes families. I know there's some people say that, but I've never talked to any missing persons expert who's been doing this longer than I have. For, when I talked to Jason Jolkowski's mother almost 4 years ago. Of course, I still talk to Mary Lau, who's been, of course, in trying to figure out what happened to her daughter, Suzanne, for over 20 years. They certainly don't think that way. And they're people who've had this, happen to them. So if they don't think that way, then I'm not going to think that way. Linda, Kathy, since June 21st. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Kathy. Yeah. Kathy says appears to be an abduction, in my opinion. I'd have to say so. It's certainly a choice at this point, Kathy. Mandy, man, I have no idea what happened to her. David P., who does Missing 411. Yeah. Well, he's entitled to think that. That's fine. I'm not going to tell him how to think. Miss Cat, I would certainly want the chance to speak out, Ed, if I was in their shoes. Like I said, I've never had a disappearance happen in my family. I hope it never happens. Nobody in my family's ever been murdered or anything. But so all I can do is tell you what all these other families members that I've talked to say. And none of them have ever said that it re-victimizes them. Not one. Because I think if they felt that way, they wouldn't be on the program. I don't know. Moving on. Jonathan Estes. Actually, Cindy, his wife, was supposed to go on trial last Wednesday. Didn't happen. I think it's because of the COVID stuff and it flaring up again. So it has been moved. I didn't write down when, but I'm just here to tell you that it didn't happen. I included it in last week's, this month's newsletter, but it didn't happen. So we're still waiting on that. You would not think, hey, it's unique times. Maybe we shouldn't be surprised, but this trial is about is a bobcat that was sold without authorization. It was essentially a theft. And now here we are. I think that the bobcat was found last August. I think we're coming up on a year. And it's still not been fleshed out in the courts. That's crazy. Let's answer some more questions. Like I said, I've already answered 2, but I still have 4 more to go. And we got a lot of things to talk about still. Lois asked me, what can a family do if a suspect in a disappearance is already in jail for another crime? What can be done? This does pop up once in a while on some disappearances that we've covered, especially once again in ones where we think we have a good idea who a suspect might be, and maybe it's a disappearance that's, say, 15 years old, and now here in the present, this guy has gone to jail for something else and might be in there for a while. What I would say first and foremost is never take for granted that the prosecution knows that the person they put in jail for whatever reason a couple years ago is connected to a disappearance from 15 years ago. Never take that for granted. All of these people live in the here and now. This is one of the problems with, of course, missing persons cases that get old. You have new people come into the department, new detectives, and they may not know anything about a disappearance that happened 10, 15 years ago. So a family that's in this situation where they think they know the person who caused the disappearance, probably a murder, they should not take for granted the DA's office, the prosecutor, knows everything about the disappearance. They probably don't. So that's first thing. Second thing is that then a dialogue has to be created between the prosecutor's office and the family. Is there a way to get this person who is now in jail to talk? To maybe be given a deal to reveal information about that disappearance that happened however many years ago. Now, the tough part about that is that if this suspect is really the suspect and it was a murder, then the person is not going to be too motivated to talk. They're in for a drug charge or something. Let's say they're going to be in jail for 5 years. Well, they know if they confess to a murder, they're going to be in jail for a lot longer than that. So it does make it difficult to make deals, but I think that has to be talked about. And if it doesn't work the first time, then you bring it up again somewhere down the road. If it doesn't work that time, you bring it up. You just keep going over and over and over. And maybe there'll be a new prosecutor or a new DA that gets elected or appointed, and that person will have a different attitude. A lot of things can happen over time, but those would be the 2 points that I would make, is that never take for granted that the DA's office knows that the person they just convicted for something could be connected to a disappearance from many years ago. And number 2, that once that's established, then maybe some deal can be worked out. That's the best I have. The problem is that we know that a lot of these people who go to jail, even if they're, these no body cases with Tad Tobias, they go to jail, they're prosecuted for a murder, there's still no body, and these people still, usually men, still don't give up the location of where they put the remains. Still don't. So that happens a lot. They're just hardcore. And if you're wondering why they do that, even if they can get a couple years knocked off the sentence, it's a form of control. Being that they're in jail and their life is now totally out of their control, they're living on somebody else's script, somebody else's itinerary. They are forced to get up at a certain time and do this and do that and go eat at this time. And, everything is totally out of their control. But if they can still have control over that family because they know something that the family doesn't, they're going to do that. They are. Because it's the last thing that they have control of in their lives. And it sucks. I suppose if we lived in North Korea or other places that they could be tortured and might be able to get the information out of them. But that's not what we, of course, do in the United States. And, of course, a lot of countries are not like that. Carrie says it's a total control thing. It certainly is. So, Lois, that was what I would that's my answer to your question on that. And I'm glad all of the viewers got to hear that answer tonight as well. Let's move on to one more question, and then we'll go back to some of the other things I have on the itinerary for tonight. Sherry asked me how many, let me see if I can read this. I did not type out the entire question. I want to get this right for you, Sherry. Where is it? Come on now. Okay. What if someone is missing but is really in the witness protection program? this doesn't come up a lot. I think you know this by now, listening to a lot of the episodes, like I know many of you have. We don't talk about the witness protection program too much on episodes. It does come up, though, in conversations off the record behind the scenes. Not a lot, as you would imagine, but it does come up. First of all, you have to understand that the witness protection program primarily is a federal program. So if somebody is put into it, then they must have testified or had big time information on some type of case or problem that was a federal issue. That's the first standard. Okay. First standard. Now, so outside of that, there are certain states that have witness protection programs, but not the big states do. California has it, Illinois has it, a few other states, but most states do not have witness protection programs. So we have to remember that murder is a state jurisdiction thing. Unless it's considered to be a hate crime or something like that. But even states have their own hate crime laws now. But murder that's why you get prosecuted by a city attorney, of course, something like Law and Order. Well, there is no very few states have witness protection programs. Just a few. I think the idea of witness protection is overblown because everybody has seen it in so many movies, and it does make a great plot in movies. Like, what was it? Was the movie Eraser with Arnold Schwarzenegger? Didn't that involve the witness protection program? But in real life, it's not that common. Yes, there are people who have gotten put in witness protection. Yes, it exists. Of course, when I think of the witness protection program, I think of the mafia. Some soldier in a mob family testifies, and it's usually a federal trial because it's a RICO, racketeering, whatever that the RICO Act. I don't know it. I know it's racketeering, and I get lost after that, because that's a federal issue, and so they get put in federal witness protection. Goodfellas, Henry Hill. Thank you, Shuri. And I think Sammy the Bull Gravano also got put in witness protection. So it's just not that common. It's really not. It's not. If you look at the budget for the witness protection program at the federal level, looking at its budget, you can tell it's not a very big program. It's very, very select people. And in states, once again, it's only a few states. So to believe that somebody who disappeared actually went into witness protection, it would have to happen in certain states, not just any state. Do I believe that we've covered any disappearances where witness protection was an issue? No, I don't. I do not. Mainly because to get into witness protection, these people have to do something in court. They have to go and appear as themselves in court with their real names, and somebody somewhere would know about that. And of course, on top of that, they would have to testify for the prosecution, not for the defense. So I think, and on top of that, I would hope that law enforcement agencies would coordinate with each other and not get confused by this and not have one thinking one thing and another thinking another. But I just think that it's totally overblown. I think that it's just gotten a lot of hype because it's been used so many times in books and in movies, and people think it's this huge, huge, huge thing, and it's just not. Carrie says the movie Witness. That may be, I don't think I've ever seen that movie, Carrie. Carrie, I don't think witness protection is as real prevalent as people hope. Yeah. Once again, I mean, thinking about some of Unfound's cases, it seems to me what's more prevalent is that people disappear before they're supposed to go to court. Like Lola Catherine Fry is one that I think of. that they disappear before they go to court, not after they go to court. So, I know, and I realize there's a real temptation for some families to think that way. There's a temptation. They want to they want to think that because frankly, it makes them feel good. But and I'm not here to dash their hopes, but I just don't think it's that common. Let's move on. Somebody had posted about this leg bone in a boot in the Mississippi River that was found within the last couple of days. They actually posted some pictures of it. And of course, it got to wondering, is this a disappearance that could be connected to any that Unfound is covered? And I saw where somebody typed out that this wasn't, very, very far from where Tim Beauchart went missing. You should know that this is the place where the leg with the boot still attached to it. Once again, it was the bone of the leg, the lower leg, was a place called Anna's Bottom, which is north of Baton Rouge by, 50, 60 miles, something like that. So my initial reaction was that it was a work boot, but now some people have changed my mind as it wasn't really, looked like a work boot because it was so muddy, but it may just be a regular type of boot, not what we would call a work boot. And I even looked at it, could this possibly be, of course, the first case that I think of is Shane Fell, but the Mississippi doesn't flow that way. This leg was found upstream on the Mississippi River, not downstream. So I don't know how the leg would flow upstream because the Mississippi River flows to the Gulf. The water doesn't flow. The Gulf doesn't go into the Mississippi. The Mississippi flows into the Gulf. So it couldn't be Shane Fells, and he wasn't wearing boots anyway. In fact, one of his shoes he was wearing shoes, and one of his shoes was found at the crash site for his car. I've also read, though, that today that this leg and boot could be connected to a man who disappeared in a boating accident about 1.5 years ago in the area. Seems like a good lead, maybe. So I'm thinking that, once again, how heck, Missy Beavers, I was just mentioned this to somebody recently, maybe it was you, Cherie, that I of course thought that Missy Beavers' murder would be solved like that. Wasn't. So, and it's still unsolved. So this may be another one of those, or this might be something that gets solved fairly quickly. My instincts tell me will be solved fairly quickly. You watch me be wrong. But it's not something you find every day. I remember, though, several years ago, was it in the Seattle area, Puget Sound or some area like that, that shoes were washing onto shore, or socks with the feet, the bones of the feet still in them. Does anybody remember that? It seemed like that was like a thing for like several months. This was going on. I don't know if they ever got to the bottom of that and find out why that was going on. But I can remember several years ago that like I said, in the state of Washington or Oregon, these shoes were washing on shore and the person's feet was still inside them. So I don't know. Maybe somebody has an answer to that. And if they ever found out what was going on there, because I don't remember. I don't even remember knowing. So, but that situation with this leg bone in the boot reminded me of that. So, with some, Carrie says, with all the, hello, Vegas girl, what's going on? Good to see you. Carrie, with all the flooding that has happened, it could literally be from about anywhere in the Midwest or north of that. Yeah, and that's something we have to remember, too, that the Mississippi River goes the whole way up to Minnesota. And maybe under particular circumstances that somebody could have gone into the river in Minnesota and ended up in Mississippi. That's certainly possible. I don't know how probable it is, but it's certainly possible. Of course, I think that our logic tells us that the person's leg went into the water somewhere around there, but Carrie's right. If this all happened during some flood season, when there was a lot of rain and the Mississippi rises up and floods all, we just don't know. Maybe somebody was in, the guy was in his house and the river rose and the guy got swept away. Could be from Missouri or anywhere. Very possible. Cherie said, I've read about a couple of other instances where leg bones were found in boots up near the Great Lakes and possibly in California. Yeah, you may be right, Cherie. That just what I think of is something that was going on in the Northwest in the Pacific Ocean. Just remember that. And Cherie says maybe that was it. Maybe you'd have to look that up, Cherie. LaFord says, thought it was a hoax because the boot looked like it was in good condition. It was muddy. I don't know what kind of, it was just muddy, which you would expect. I don't know what kind of condition it was in, but it was muddy. Just not something you see every day. Maybe it is a hoax. Maybe somebody will find that out. But I think for right now, authorities are taking it seriously. Cherie says, like 3 years ago, Cherie up in Washington and Oregon. It seemed to me it was longer ago than that. Seems like it was more than 3 years ago. It seems like that was even before I started Unfound. So that was almost 4 years ago. Okay. So that was just my opinion on it. Maybe and I don't know. I'm sure we talked about it at the time, but I don't know kind of footwear Tim Beauchart was wearing when he disappeared. But I'm guessing it's probably not him. It seems to me that this is probably going to be a situation where somebody was on the river boating or working on a barge or something, or like I said before, maybe lived in a house or a trailer near the river and the river rose up unexpectedly and took the person away. Just Mississippi is like, it's crazy. It's a crazy river. I've been across it many times, driven across it. It can be so wide in some places. It's so powerful. Just, a lot of different things are possible. Let's move on to this. I told you, some people were asking me, any Tom Brown updates. Of course, we have not talked about him. There's been really nothing to say. I will admit I haven't talked to Penny in a while. Not that I'm avoiding her, she's avoiding me or anything. There's just been really no reason to contact her. I will tell you, though, that at least between myself and at least a couple of my assistants, the discussion continues. And in fact, Cherie and I just had a conversation about Tom's case just a few days ago. Phil Klein did make, there we go, Cherie, 12 human feet and shoes found in 2011 near Canadian border. So yes. Okay. Well, there you go, Cherie. Yeah. See if you can find, if they ever figured out what that was, Cherie, if you aren't too busy. I think that might be interesting before the show is over to maybe get a resolution on that. Okay. If you can't, that's fine too. But Phil Klein put out a statement within the last couple weeks, and I'm going to read it. Once again, I'm going to, as I say, every time that this comes up, I've never talked to Phil Klein. I've never had an email exchange with him. No messenger, nothing. Never communicated with him at all. No reason. All right. I'm not avoiding him. He's not avoiding me. I just for the record. But here's the statement. I think he posted this to Facebook and other places. As we are not able to give details to the public regarding the Tom Brown case at this time, we want to make this public statement. We are in the process of completing the investigation side of the case, to which my team and myself fully anticipate moving to the prosecution phase of this case sometime near the middle or end of the year. We want the public to know that we have worked hard on this case and fully anticipate a grand jury to hear it soon. Yeah, I don't know I don't know anything more than I think most of you do. Like I said, Tom Brown has been an important case for Unfound, and I think that Unfound has been important for Tom's disappearance. I think that we've followed it as closely as we can, even though we put out new disappearances, new episodes every week. Tom Brown's disappearance is just one of about 175 that Unfound has covered since September of 2016. So, at some point, of course, we have other cases and other guests and families that need our attention too. So I have not kept up with every detail that's going on. Of course, I was there about a year ago, enjoyed it. Great to meet Penny in person and cruise around with her and her son and go to these different locations. Of course, the great get together that we had in Amarillo was fantastic. Unfortunately, can't do it this year because of all the virus stuff. But I haven't heard of any new movement. I haven't heard of any suspects. I haven't heard of any subpoenas or warrants or anything else. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. I just don't know about it. But being that at this point, we do have so many connections in that area, Hemphill County, Canadian, Amarillo, and the surrounding area, that I am certain that I would have heard about these things if they happened. I just don't know. I've not heard of anything that Phil Klein has been doing or anybody he's been talking to or anything else. That's just the truth. You know me, the way I handle things. If I know something and I am able to tell you, I will tell you. If I know something and can't tell you, I will also say, I know something and can't tell you. What I'm telling you is I don't know anything, so I don't have anything to tell you. You know what I will tell you, though, just as an observer at this point, to my knowledge, there's still a cause of death in Tom's disappearance and the finding of his remains. And as long as that is the situation, I don't know how you bring anything to a grand jury if there's no proof that a murder was committed. Now, maybe there is, and I just don't know about it. But then what I would also say is, I guess then something happened between that meeting that we now know Nathan Lewis recorded and today. That means that something has changed since that last meeting in August of 2019 and today. I don't know of anything that has changed. I know that Nathan Lewis is no longer the sheriff, but that has nothing to do with Tom Brown's disappearance. The reason he's not sheriff anymore is because he forged documents regarding the training of his deputies. That's why he's not the sheriff anymore. Has nothing to do. Yes, he got a lot of crap, and he should. And I know a lot of people are suspicious about Nathan Lewis in regards to Tom's death. But I don't know of any change in any status anywhere from August till now. That doesn't mean there isn't any, but like I said, I think that we have, as my assistants like to tell me, the Unfound discussion group has how many? 8,000 people in it. And they'll claim, I don't know if the number's this high, but they say that at least 1,000 of the people are in there because of Tom Brown's disappearance. And not one of them has contacted me with new information. So I just don't know. I would use another phrase, but my assistants hate when I use that phrase, and they know what phrase I'm talking about, but I'm not going to use it. I just don't know. I hope that what he is saying is true, but I'm puzzled. So that's really all I have to say about it. I'm not criticizing Phil Klein. He's been working on it for how many years now? He obviously knows about all this more than I do. But it's just weird to me that, and of course I've gotten several leaks, and a lot of these leaks ended up being true. The leak I got on Pine Gregory, discovering the remains, was true. And I just couldn't go forward with it because I couldn't get any corroboration on it. I thought it was just a rumor. But somebody told me that in January or February, right after it happened, that's what happened. And I couldn't get any corroboration. So I get a lot of leaks, even here in Clearwater Beach, Florida. I've gotten no leaks. And if I got leaks, I would tell you. I wouldn't tell you what they are, but I would tell you that, yeah, I'm hearing things. I'm not hearing anything. So I just don't know. That's all I have to say about that. Let's move on. Let me see. Amanda says, I listened before Tom's case, but his was the one that made my hair stand up on end. You and a lot of people, Amanda. Michelle says, Thomas's case is one of those that does tug at your heartstrings. Yeah, well. As you know, all of them are equal to me. I just got through saying that an hour ago, that we treat all these people the same. We don't care if they were president of their class or student council or captain of the football team or they were a prostitute who was sex trafficked, etc. We don't care. We care that it happened. It's horrible. We treat everybody the same. Sheree says, however, we still are working on facts, verifiable info. That is true. That is true. We are in our own way, even though we have a lot of other things to do, as we all know, behind the scenes. That is true. What Sheree just typed there is true. That we are still working on our own angles. Once again, the way we understand Tom's disappearance and his remains being found. It just sometimes these things take time. I don't know if we're going at it from the same angle that Phil Klein is. I don't know what he's doing. And he surely doesn't know what we're doing. If we ever have any information that we discover, first of all, tell Penny. And she and I will talk about it. And then we'll decide what needs to be done. And maybe we'll come up with some things before the year is over. That's all I can say. But as of this time, whatever Phil Klein is talking about, I have no inkling what he means. Let's move on to a couple other questions. And then maybe I want to cover one more topic, and then we'll get to this Friday's episode. Kimberly asked me, have any tips that have come in to Unfound solved any cases? I'm just going to be honest with you, Kimberly. I think the answer is no. I don't feel bad about that. But what I will say is that we've surely gotten some tips that have moved cases forward. Of course, we're just talking about Tom Brown's. Surely things that we found out have certainly shed more light, I think, on it. I still get people telling me that when we covered that, they thought that this was all just going to go away, somewhere around April 2, 2018, which was like a year and some months after Tom disappeared. And then all of a sudden, Unfound, I interviewed Penny. It was a 3-hour some episode. There was the video and everything, and it brought it back to prominence. And it's still fairly prominent. So, and there are others, I think with Amanda Fravel, which coincidentally was the next week. You talk about 2 weeks in a row of getting a lot of information. We certainly did some good things with Amanda's disappearance. We certainly have moved quite a few of these cases forward. Kimberly, we've certainly brought out more information, the way we do things, more than anybody else has. more information that can be brought to the public. And you never know where that information is going to go. But, being responsible for the solution of a case, I don't think so. And once again, I don't feel bad about that because these things are difficult. And this is an international program. It's we're not just, I live here in Clearwater Beach. We're not covering only disappearances in Pinellas County. We're covering disappearances all over the United States and some in Canada. And we're getting the information out there, and in the process, hopefully asking the right questions where more information is made public, and you never know where that can go. I think that if you look at the disappearances that we've covered that have been solved, Zoe Campos, Andrea Bowman, I guess Esther Westenbarger, Austin Pivo, I think all of the people who were the guests for those episodes and others are happy they did the program and they think it helped. So I go by what they think. And if they're happy, then I'm happy. Laura. It's kind of a same question, but Laura asked me, how much new evidence have we discovered? I think we've brought in a lot of new evidence to the table that we've made public that has I guess one of the biggest things we do on Unfound is we name names. Now that's the guest's choice to do that, but I know just, sometimes I know that I'll run across a news story about a disappearance that we've covered on Unfound. Run across like an old news story of a disappearance. Let's just say, pick one from 2006. And that we eventually did cover on Unfound. You'll read all those news articles and they're very general. There's no names listed. Some of them don't even list or name where the person was last seen or who the person was that last seen that missing person. We do all of that on Unfound. So when it comes to new evidence and new information, surely we've done that. Surely. Cherie says, better question is how many of these disappearances Ellie solved? Well, yeah, that's a good point, Cherie. Thank you for saying that. You're right. We've covered 175 disappearances, and how many of them have been totally solved? Not many. I mean, some remains, like Tom Brown's remains have been found, but we're still not totally sure what happened. Everybody has their opinion. And Laura Bible and Ashley Freeman, there's a guy in custody who murdered the parents and murdered the daughters, the daughter and her friend, Laura. Their remains are still missing. Angie Arnell, her husband went to jail for 4 years for her disappearance. Her remains have still not been found, and he's walking around a free man. So there's only been a few. Austin Pivo, those guys are going to trial for his murder. Zoe Campos with Carlos Rodriguez, Andrea Bowman, Dennis Bowman, Esther Westenbarger. It seems like it was an accident. Crystal Morrison, an accident. Yeah, it's a very low percentage. But these are tough. These are the toughest of the toughest of the toughest of any mystery that exists on this earth. But we're giving it our best shot. I have a long write-up on this, but I'm going to only cover it very quickly. I got up this morning earlier than I usually do and turned on the TV, and I was flipping through, and I got to the Oxygen Network, and that TV show, The Disappearance of Maura Murray, was on. And I watched it a few episodes in a row. It wasn't like I was just sitting there and watching it. I was doing some other things at the time, some unfound stuff and some not unfound stuff. But I was watching it and everything. I got to tell you, those shows are so emotionally manipulative. I just hate it. I know that I've talked to you recently about how there might be a chance of Unfound doing a TV show, something. I mentioned that a few weeks ago. It's still going on. But I would never be on a program like that. I know it was popular. We all know how popular Maura's Disappearance is. I like it that they got to interview the first cop that was on the scene and all these other people and everything, but it is certainly emotionally manipulative because you have to remember something. Here's what I don't like. You have to remember something, that when they do a program like that, it's in episodes, but they shoot the entire thing at one time. Okay? That's what they do. And so in that episode, for example, they're talking about how the chief of the police of the Haverhill or whatever the area is called, I forget, that he might have been on the scene that night, and he was the only one that drove this police car that had 001 on it, which I think the woman in that was totally lying. That he, there's a possibility that he might have been there, and what does that mean and everything. Whereas what you find out is they're telling you this where we know they've already talked to him and he gave a perfect explanation. So they set it up that this is something shady, even though they know it's not, because they've already talked to the former police chief. And they figured out, no, he didn't always drive that 001 vehicle. And the cop that was on there that night, he admitted he was driving the vehicle that night. And so they set this up that this is all kind of shady and mysterious. And they leave a cliffhanger. And then in the next episode, they say, oh no, everything we said in the last episode, total bullcrap. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Now, I'm lucky for me that all of these episodes happen to be one after the other on the Oxygen Network this morning. Now, imagine when it was originally came out and it was coming out every week. And you're being told, this week, oh, there's something suspicious regarding the police chief. And he's driving this years. He did it. And then the very next week, they talked to the police chief, and it turns out everything that they said in the last episode was crap. And they know it. Why? Because they film it all at one time. Oh, man. But I think they get away with this because most people don't know how these things are filmed. They are not filmed like a sitcom, like Seinfeld. Seinfeld, they do it. They would film a week, then a week, then a week, then a week, then a week, and the episode would come out, and they had to get every episode done. If you ever watched Jason Alexander watch an interview with him, he was talking about how the filming schedule was for Seinfeld. What they did on Monday, what they did on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, every week. And they had to get that episode done because the episode was coming out the next week. That's not how they film these things. That's not how they film that program. So they film it, they all get it in the can, and then they edit it, and it comes out as episodes that these people did get interviewed. I guess that one cop was being interviewed for the first time. And so I respect them for that. That was great. But what you find out is that all this stuff was just hype, and the TV bought into that hype as well. So I just don't, I don't know. I'm giving you my word. I would never be involved in something like that. I could never. Not for $1 billion. I'm serious. I just think, I just think that I don't like to manipulate people that way. This is why we do structured interviews on the program, that I don't want to emotionally manipulate any of you. Okay? That is not what I do. Now, if it's some drama program, some fictional TV show, I know why they do that. Leave that cliffhanger right before the commercial so you'll stick around for after. I get it. But when it comes to tell you, good one, Cherie. It's just, I just don't like it. You're playing with people's lives here. I will say one thing that I've learned from this, that, Fred Murray, obviously, as all these families are, very emotionally scarred. And hello, Nina. I don't, people have said that, he could have been involved in his daughter's disappearance, which of course is total crap. But I will also say that I don't necessarily believe everything that's coming out of his mouth either. I think that you can have that standpoint and say, yep, he didn't have anything to do with his daughter's disappearance. But on the other hand, you know what? There are things that he says that I don't believe. I think I'm in that camp. I think I am. But I just found that the TV show to be extremely manipulative, emotionally manipulative for the audience. Whereas I do laud them for interviewing these police officers who were there that night. That is surely a good thing. And it was good to hear from them. But I don't like the manipulation of people's expectations and things. Just don't like it. So let's move on. And that is a writing, producing thing. That is not a law enforcement reporter thing. Let's get to this Friday. Being that I did mention drugs and people with addictions during the course of this show tonight, this is another one of those disappearances. The disappearance of Jessica Garino from Goldsboro, North Carolina. Disappeared. The most correct date that we can come up with is January 22nd, 2012. The guest for this episode is Jessica's older sister, actually the oldest of three sisters. Her name is Ashley Hartman. And this episode is called Like a Bad Neighbor. And yes, I am kind of riffing off of the State Farm, Like a Good Neighbor, State Farm is there. Well, this Friday, it's called Like a Bad Neighbor. Right, Jessica Garino. That's right, Cherie. And the reason it's called that is because Jessica, while she was living in Tennessee, she was renting a home. She was only 19, 20 years old, but renting a house. Her one sister was living with her. And then I think even the other sister came to live with Jessica, and they were living there. And the next door neighbor was this guy. His name is Carson. They'd cook out together, get together. He was quite a bit older than these young women were. But they all got along fairly well, even though he was a lot older. And one day, what ended up happening, not to give too much of away before Friday, but the fact is this Carson guy got Jessica involved in drugs. And then he scooted out of town, out of the entire state of Tennessee when the police came looking for him. And then a year later or so, Jessica, because she had developed this drug problem from Carson, she decided maybe she was going to try another state, maybe try to clean herself up, get back on the right track. Well, what her family ended up finding out is she moved to North Carolina, and who was she living with? Carson. Secretively, not telling anybody. In fact, she had lied to her family about who she was living with. Well, the story goes is that, as we hear so many times in these types of disappearances, Carson says, yep, she just up and disappeared in the middle of the night. But what is different in this disappearance is that there were two other men living in this house with Jessica and Carson at the time. And over the course of 2012, their stories changed as to their memory as to what happened. They told one story a month later, but then the law enforcement, when they talked to them several months later, these two guys changed their stories. So that is this Friday's Disappearance. Jessica Garino, Garino, from Goldsboro, North Carolina. We're putting the date as January 22nd, and you'll find out why it can't be totally precise, but that's as accurate as we can be. January 22nd, 2012. The guest is Jessica's oldest sister, Ashley, and the episode is called Like a Bad Neighbor. So I think that is it. Another hour and 45-minute program, and it goes so fast. It is just crazy. So what do we do tonight? Told you about how I'm going to be involved in a disc golf show of some type, video or audio, within the next few months. Looking forward to that, talking about my favorite sport. Talked about the passing of Janice Norwood. Unfound on the Ground this Monday at 8:15 p.m. Eastern for all of you premium Patreon members. Once again, patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. You can also contribute at paypal.me/Unfound Podcast. Talked about the Thompson poll. We talk about those polls every live show. Talked about the Maura Murray TV show and how, although I loved it that they interviewed some of these people we've heard about so many times, on the other hand, I thought it was way over the top, emotionally manipulative. Talked about drug disappearances and about why we may cover so many of them on Unfound. Linda Stoltzfoos still missing. Jonathan Estes's his wife Cindy's trial did not happen last Wednesday, so it's been put off, rescheduled. Talked about the leg bone in the boot on the shore of the Mississippi River. We talked about Phil Klein's statement that he posted, over a week ago. Took a bunch of questions from Jill, Natasha, Lois, Sherry, Kimberly, and Laura. And then we finished up, as we always do, with this Friday's episode, preview of it, the disappearance of Jessica Garino. So you will hear me Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern, and then I'll see some of you in the think tank on Sunday evening. Hope everybody has a great rest of the week. It's been beautiful here in Florida. What am I going to do tomorrow? I got some calls to make tomorrow. I'm going to do some other things. And I'll see you later. Thank you all for tuning in tonight and staying with this show for an hour and 45 minutes. One of my favorite parts of my week. I love it. Good night, everyone.